part of public health protection since the 1200s. The Constitution of the United States provides for police powers necessary to preserve health safety as well as other events. These powers include public health surveillance. State and local powers also provide for surveillance activities. Disease surveillance has been part of public health protection since the 1200s during the investigations of the bubonic plague in Europe. The Constitution of the United States provides for police powers necessary to preserve the health and safety as well as other events. These powers include public health surveillance. State and local police powers also provide for surveillance activities. Health departments usually have legal authority to investigate unusual clusters of illness. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Typhoid Mary. Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary, was the first person in the United States identified as an asymptomatic carrier of the pathogen associated with typhoid fever. She was presumed to have infected 51 people, 3 of whom died over the course of her career as a cook. She was twice forcibly isolated by public health authorities and died after a total of nearly 3 decades in isolation. So she was born in Cookstown County, Tyrone, Ireland. She immigrated to the U.S. in 1983 when she was 15. She lived with her aunt and uncle for a time and then found work as a cook for a rich family. She worked as a cook in the New York City area for 7 families. In 1900, she worked in Merrimack, New York, where, within 2 weeks of her employment, residents developed typhoid fever. In 1901, she moved to Manhattan, where members of the family for whom she worked developed fevers and diarrhea, and then the laundress died. Mallon then went to work for a lawyer. She left after 7 of the 8 people in that household became ill. In 1906, she took a position in Oyster Bay, Long Island, and within 2 weeks, 10 of the 11 family members were hospitalized with typhoid. She changed jobs again, and similar occurrences happened in 3 more households. She worked as a cook for the family of a wealthy New York banker, Charles Henry Warren. When the Warrens rented a house in Oyster Bay for the summer of 1906, Mallon went along too. From August 27th to September 3rd, 6 of the 11 people in the family came down with typhoid fever. The disease at that time was an unusual in Oyster Bay, according to 3 medical doctors who practiced there. Mallon was subsequently hired by other families, and outbreaks followed her. In late 1906, one family hired a typhoid researcher named George Soper to investigate. Soper published the results on June 15th in 1907. This was published in the Journal of American Medical Association, and he believed that Mallon, aka Typhoid Mary, might be the source of the outbreak. He wrote, "It was found that the family changed cooks on August 4th. This was about 3 weeks before the typhoid epidemic broke out. She remained in the family only a short time, leaving about 3 weeks after the outbreak occurred. The cook was described as an Irish woman about 40 years of age, tall, heavy, single. She seemed to be in perfect health." Soper discovered that a female Irish cook who fit the physical description he was given was involved in all the outbreaks. He was unable to locate her because she generally left after an outbreak began. Without giving a forwarding address, Soper learned of an active outbreak in a pet house on Park Avenue and discovered Mallon was the cook. 2 of the household servants were hospitalized, and the daughter of the family died of typhoid. When Soper approached Mallon about her possible role in spreading typhoid, she adamantly rejected his request for urine and stool samples. Since Mallon refused to give samples, he decided to compile a 5-year history of Mallon's employment. Soper found that of the 8 families that hired Mallon as a cook, members of 7 claimed to have contracted typhoid fever. On his next visit, he brought another doctor with him, but again was turned away. During a later encounter when Mallon was herself hospitalized, he told her he would write a book and give her all the royalties. She angrily rejected his proposal and locked herself Journal of American Medical Association. Later, in a textbook that defined typhoid again, she was called Typhoid Mary. Malin admitted poor hygiene, saying she did not understand the purpose of hand washing because she did not pose a risk. In prison, she was forced to give stool and urine samples. Doctors found a significant nidus of typhoid bacteria in her gallbladder, so a colon. Authorities suggested removing her gallbladder, but she refused, as she did not believe she carried the disease. She was also unwilling to cease working as a cook. The New York City Health Department inspector determined her to be a carrier. Under Section 1169 and 1170 of the Greater New York Charter, Malin was held in isolation for 3 years at a clinic located in North Border Island. Eventually, Eugene H. Porter, the New York State Commissioner of Health, decided that disease carriers should no longer be kept in isolation and that Malin could be freed if she agreed to stop working as a cook and take reasonable steps to prevent transmitting typhoid to others. On February 19, Malin agreed, and she prepared to change her occupation and would give assurance by affidavit that she would, upon her release, take such hygienic precautions that would protect those with whom she came into contact with from infection. She was released from quarantine and returned to the mainland. Upon her release, Malin was given a job as a laundress, which paid less than cooking. She soon changed her name to Mary Brown and returned to her old occupation. For the next 5 years, she worked in a number of kitchens. Wherever she worked, there were outbreaks of typhoid. However, she changed jobs frequently, and Soper was unable to find her. In 1915, Typhoid Mary started another major outbreak, this time at Sloan Hospital for Women in New York City. 25 people were infected and 2 died. She again left, but the police were able to find and arrest her, and when she brought food to her friend in Long Island. After arresting her, public health authorities returned her to quarantine on North Brother Island. On March 27, 1915, she was unwilling to have her gallbladder removed, so Malin remained confined for the remainder of her life. She became a minor celebrity and was occasionally interviewed by the media. They were told not to accept even water for her. Later, she was allowed to work as a technician in the island's laboratory washing bottles. Malin spent the rest of her life in quarantine at the Riverside Hospital. 6 years before her death, she was paralyzed by a stroke. On November 11, 1938, she died of pneumonia at age 69, and autopsy found evidence of live typhoid bacteria in her gallbladder. Her body was then cremated and buried in the Bronx. So, because of Typhoid Mary, we were able to understand the idea behind asymptomatic carriers. Disease surveillance is the ongoing systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation and dissemination of specific health data for use in public health. Surveillance is important because it generates knowledge of a disease or event outbreak pattern, including timing, geographic distribution, susceptible population. changes in infectious agents, detect changes in health practices, and facilitate planning. Purposes of surveillance. It helps public health departments identify trends and unusual disease patterns. It sets priorities for using scarce resources and develops and evaluates programs for commonly occurring and universally occurring diseases or events. Collaboration among partners. A quality surveillance system requires collaboration among a number of agencies and individuals. Such collaboration promotes the development of a comprehensive plan and a directory of emergency responses and contacts for effective communication and information sharing. Nurses are often in the forefront of responses to be made in the surveillance process. The type of information be investigated. This is using a precise step-by-step plan, outlining procedure with a number of steps to help identify an appropriate vet. How to investigate, whom to contact, how and whom information is to be disseminated, who is responsible for appropriate steps. Alright, so I'm going to give you an example of this with AIDS. The first known case of AIDS in a human occurred in a man who died in the Congo. This was in 1969. Later, from his preserved blood samples, it was confirmed that he had HIV. The authors of the study did not sequence a full virus from his samples, writing that attempts to amplify HIV-1 fragments of greater than 300 base pairs were unsuccessful. However, after numerous attempts, 4 short sequences were obtained. June 28, in New York City in 1959, Arduin Antonio, 49-year-old Jamaican-American shipping clerk, died of pneumocystis carni pneumonia, a disease closely associated with AIDS, an opportunistic illness that's an AIDS-defining illness. Gordon Hennigar, who performed the postmortem examination of the man's body, found the first reported instance of associated pneumocystis carni disease in an adult, to be so unusual that he preserved his lungs for later study. The case is published in 2 medical journals. In 1960, HIV-2, a viral variant found in West Africa, is thought to have transferred to people from the sooty monkey in Guinea. 1964, Jerome Horwitz of Barbara Ann Karmanos Cancer Institute in Wayne State University School of Medicine synthesizes AZT under a grant by the NIH, the National Institute of Health. This was originally intended as an anti-cancer drug. In 1966, genetic studies of the virus indicate that in or about 1966, HIV first arrived in the Americas, infecting 1 person in Haiti. At this time, many Haitians were working in Congo, providing the opportunity for infection. In 1968, the disease spread from the 1966 American strand but remained unrecognized for another 12 years. In 1969, a St. Louis teenager identified as Robert Rayford dies of an illness that baffles his doctors. 18 years later, molecular biologists at Tulane University figure out that it's HIV. In 1972, Gates and Dugas became sexually active. Although he was proved to not be patient zero in the context of partners, he was in the late 1970s, presenting with Kaposi sarcoma. In 1982, suggests he may have been infected as early as 1972. In 1975, the first reports of wasting and other symptoms later determined to be AIDS are reported in residents of Africa. The daughter of Arvid No dies in January 1975. And Arvid No was a Norwegian truck driver and sailor who contracted HIV, one of the first in Europe to be confirmed and spread to his wife and youngest daughter. In 1977, Danish physician Greth Rask dies of AIDS contracted in Africa. A San Francisco prostitute in 1977 gives birth to the first of 3 children who were later diagnosed with AIDS. The children's blood was tested after their death and revealed HIV infection. The mother died of AIDS in 1987. Gates and Dugas get legally married in Los Angeles in order to get citizenship. He stays in Silver Lake, a section of Los Angeles, whenever he is in town. In 1978, a Portuguese man known as Senor José, English, Mr. Joseph, dies. He will later be confirmed as the first known infection of HIV-2 and is believed to have been exposed to the disease in Guinea. In 1979, an early case of AIDS in the United States of a female baby born in New Jersey in 1973 and 74. She was born to a 16-year-old girl, an unidentified drug injector who had sex with multiple partners. The baby died in 79 at age 5. In 1980, April 24th, San Francisco resident Ken Horn, the first AIDS case in the United States to be recognized at the time, was reported to the Center for Disease Control with Kaposi sarcoma, and was also suffering from cryptococcus, another AIDS-defining illness. October 31st, French-Canadian flight attendant Gaetan Dugas pays his first known visit to New York City bathhouse. He is later deemed patient zero for his apparent connection to many early cases of AIDS in the United States. December 23rd, Rick Welikoff, a Brooklyn schoolteacher, dies of AIDS in New York City. He is the 4th U.S. citizen known to die from this. January 15th, Nick Locke became the first known AIDS death in New York City. May 18th, Lawrence Mapp becomes the first journalist in the world to write about the epidemic in the New York Native, a gay newspaper. A gay tipster overheard his physician mention that some gay men were being treated in the ICU in New York City for strange pneumonia. Disease rumors largely unfounded was the headline of Mapp's article. Mapp repeated New York City public health officials' claims that there was no way of disease investigation. At this point, however, the CDC had been gotten involved and had been gathering information for about a month on the outbreak that Mapp's source dismissed. June 5th, the CDC reports a cluster of pneumocystis pneumonia in 5 gay men in Los Angeles. In July 3rd, an article in the New York Times carries the headline, "Rare Cancer Seen in 41 Homosexuals." The article describes cases of Kaposi sarcoma found in 41 gay men in New York City and San Francisco. patients to have died of AIDS. Okay. Then in July, the first known case in the UK. One of the first reported patients to have died of AIDS in the U.S. is reported to the Journal of Gastroenterology. Louis Weinstein, the treating physician, commented that although no clear-cut evidence of immune deficiency could be demonstrated in our patients, this could not be ruled out. By the end of the year, 112 people are known to have died from the disease. And they used to call it GRID. June 18th, exposure to some substance rather than an infectious agent may eventually lead to immunodeficiency among a subset of homosexual male populations that share a particular style. This is a quote. For example, Marmor et al. Recently reported that exposure to amyl nitrate was associated with an increased risk of Kaposi sarcoma in New York City. Exposure to inhalant sexual stimulants, central nervous system stimulants, and a variety of other street drugs was common among males belonging to clusters of cases of Kaposi sarcoma, PCP, in Los Angeles and Orange County. So you see how they're grouping patterns together. This is really important when you're looking at surveillance and infectious disease. July 9th, the CDC reports a cluster of opportunistic infection, OI, and Kaposi sarcoma among patients recently entering the U.S. July 27th, the term AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, is proposed at a meeting in Washington of gay community leaders, federal bureaucrats, and CDC to replace the word GRID, which was also known as gay-related immunodeficiency, because it was evidence that it was not gay-specific. That summer, there was a first known case in Italy. In September 24, 1982, the CDC defines a case of AIDS as a disease at least moderately predictive of a defect in cell-mediated immunity occurring in a person with no known cause for diminished resistance to that. Such disease includes Kaposi sarcoma, PCP pneumonia, and serious opportunistic infection. Diagnoses are considered to fit the case definition only if based on sufficiently reliable methods, generally histology or culture. Some patients who are considered AIDS cases on the basis of diseases only moderately predictive of cellular immunodeficiency may not actually be immunodeficient and may not be part of the current epidemic. December 10, a baby in California becomes ill in the first known cause of contracting AIDS from a blood transfusion. Also, there's a first known case in Brazil, Canada, and Australia. 1983. Alright, this is when it starts getting good. Francois Barré Tennessee at the Pasteur Institute in Paris isolated a retrovirus that killed T cells from the lymph system of a gay AIDS patient. In the following month, she would find it an additionally gay and hemophiliac sufferer. This retrovirus would be called by several names, including LAV, HTLV3, and then finally being named HIV in 1986. The CDC National AIDS Hotline is established. So that March, United States Public Health Service issues donor screening guidelines for blood. AIDS high-risk groups should not donate blood or plasma products. First AIDS-related death Melbourne. The Hawke Labour government invested in a significant campaign that to this day has been credited with ensuring that Australia has the lowest HIV infection rate to this day. AIDS diagnosed in Mexico for the first time. And then the PCR polymerase chain reaction technique is developed by Carrie Mullis and is widely used in AIDS research. Jabriath and Klaus Noe become the first internationally known recording artists to die from AIDS. In 1984, Gaten Zuvas, who was the French-Canadian flight attendant who was patient zero, died. On April 23rd, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Margaret Heckler announces at the press conference that an American scientist, Robert Gallo, has discovered the probable cause of AIDS. The retrovirus is subsequently named Human Immunodeficiency Virus, or HIV, in 1986. He also declared that a vaccine will be available within 2 years, which we know didn't happen. A famous French philosopher then died that June. September 6th, the AIDS show will run for 2 years, and it's a documentary. In December 17th, Ryan White was diagnosed with AIDS by a doctor performing a partial lung removal. White became infected with HIV from a blood product known as Factor VIII, which was administered to him on a regular basis for hemophilia. So at this point, it was starting to get more national attention. In March 2nd, the FDA provided an ELISA test, which we still use to this day to detect HIV. In October 2nd, Rock Hudson died of AIDS. On July 25th, 1985, he was the first American celebrity to publicly admit to having AIDS, and he was diagnosed with it June 5th, 1984, and he died October 2nd, 1985. And then people just started dying, more and more famous people. Ricky Wilson from the B-52. And then Keith Strickland. October, a conference of public health officials, including representatives of the CDC and the WHO, met to talk about AIDS. Then it started to spread in China. HIV virus is adopted as name of the retrovirus that was first proposed. In January 14th, 1 million Americans have already been infected with the virus, and that number then will jump. With February, President Reagan finally, after all this time, that February, instructs the Surgeon General, Everett Koop, to prepare a report on AIDS. He was excluded from the Executive Task Force on AIDS established in 1983. Without allowing Reagan's domestic policy advisors to review the report, Koop released the report at the press conference in October 22nd, 1986. Attorney Jeffrey Bowers is fired from the firm of Baker and McKenzie after AIDS-related Kaposi's sarcoma lesions appeared on his face. The firm maintained that he was fired purely for his performance. He sued the firm in one of the first AIDS discrimination cases that became the inspiration for the film Philadelphia. A model named Gia Karanji died. The Soviet Union and now India has their first case. AZT was developed, and the Western blot test was approved. And that's our rapid HIV test. So if you can see how they have to find patient zero and look at patterns to then diagnose